Hi, everyone. When I was 18, I just graduated high school, and I had to fight my parents not to leave earlier and risk not graduating. But I graduated high school, and I immediately took off on a flight, and I headed for middle of rural Nebraska. I set out because I wanted to join the Great March for Climate Action. I believed fundamentally that there were people and places that were being affected by climate change that I, coming from 150,000 in middle-level Willamette Valley, Eugene, Oregon, just could not ever witness unless I was there personally, intimately meeting these people and places. So I joined a group of about 22. We were from all over the U.S. and Canada. And we set out to walk from Los Angeles here to Washington, D.C. over 8 months, covering 3,000 miles. And we did. We wanted to urge political action from the representatives whose states we visited, but also to really understand the faces and the places of climate devastation and of climate resilience. When I joined this march, I had really high expectations. I actually joined with the goal of walking barefoot. So I had this grand image of myself walking across this nation, barefoot, trekking, walking humbly, all these grand ideas. It was a little bit too much for my body, physically and emotionally. I could not bear that burden of walking barefoot across this land. You can imagine walking 20 miles a day in 100-degree heat over gravelly roads in rural, agricultural Midwest states, along highways, along bike paths, inner cities, rural areas. After 3 weeks of attempting to walk barefoot for 4 months, my body could not take it. My feet gave out, my knees gave out, I was so exhausted. I had to then spend several days being driven every single place I wanted to go because my body could not take me there. So I learned, as an activist, as a member of society who wants to push towards inclusion and justice, we need to take on what is reasonable. We can't be overburdened. We need to take care of our bodies and our spirit. That's really important in this movement. So I had to face myself as I endured this walk. There were hard times. We walked through blizzards, 100-degree heat. We walked alongside illegal pet coke dumpings in southeast Chicago. We walked through very long, arduous stretches of nothing. We endured physical discomfort, emotional discomfort, but we also faced moments of hope and clarity. Outside of Moline, Iowa, we were camped out. We set up our camp outside of a church lawn. And I remember this man drove by in his mid-20s, and he got out of his pickup truck and started a conversation with us. What the heck are you doing here? I've never seen this kind of group around in my small town. So we pack up and we say goodbye to this guy. The next day, he comes back. But this time, he's dropped off out of his pickup, and he has 2 bags with him. And Paul joined us until the rest of the march, 3.5 months until D.C. So people will also surprise you. And there is goodness, and there is light. And we never really know the impact that we're going to have on each other. But it's still worth it to go out there and to try and make a change and to try and really understand each other and why we're all part of this movement. Now, coming into Washington, D.C., which was our end destination, I had this grand idea, again, a little bit grand here in my imagining. But I had this idea that we would walk into our nation's capital and be joined by thousands of people. We'd walk in, we organized this event, we carried these stories with us as trying to be stewards of these climate stories of impact and resiliency, and we wanted to share them at our nation's capital. We wanted to influence people, but also political leaders. And we were highly optimistic. We walk into our nation's capital, and there's maybe 100 of us, and we do our event, and we share our stories, and we go home. And this feeling of disappointment, this questioning, what was the impact? What was the point? People were asking me, well, why did you do that? Was it just for you? Was that selfish? What did you actually accomplish with that journey? In this long walk, it felt like when we finished, We had all the expectation and all the weight on these political leaders to then accept us and listen to us and then make a change. Little did I know that this walk would only prepare me for a much longer walk. Exactly a year later, in August of 2015, we decided to file a constitutional climate change rights case outside of Eugene Federal District Courthouse. The young people on this case, ages 8 through 19, I was the oldest at the time, well, still am. We had come from all over the United States. We come from Kauai, we come from Manhattan, we come from the shores of Florida, and we come from Eugene. And we're a part of this case because we believe that it's time to take action in our own hands. As younger people, we may not have a lot of political clout. I was one of the few people who could vote when we filed this case. But we still have a voice, and our court systems are the way that we're going to demand climate recovery. This case asks, and I will say demands, that our federal government look at the fact that they violated our constitutional rights, our Fifth Amendment rights, for the past 6 decades by their deliberate and knowing actions in contributing to climate devastation and destabilization. We're demanding that the courts uphold their responsibility and their opportunity to utilize the system of checks and balances and demand a climate recovery plan from our federal government. And it's young people who will, in October, stand for 8 to 10 weeks of trial in Eugene Federal District Courthouse and testify and have their experts called to the stand as we finally get our day in trial and day in court. Remember, we filed this case 3 years ago, almost 3 years to this day. 3 years we've been fighting to be recognized as individuals who have an opportunity to be in that courtroom. We've been fighting frivolous delay tactics, attempts from our government to dismiss our case outright. We've been fighting for standing. We've been fighting for legal recognition, and we've just secured that. We've secured that from every branch of government as the federal government again attempted to dismiss our case by appealing to the Supreme Court and was just unanimously dismissed. We are finally going to court October 29th, and I implore all of you to take action in your communities. Because what I learned is that the faces of climate change are all of us, and they're plentiful, and they're across this nation, and they affect every way and every facet of our lives and of our land. And yet, if we all can team together and show up in our authentic selves and bring our authentic tools and voices and stories, we can collectively inspire each other and demand real change, not just from political leaders and from government, but from our local communities and from each other. So I'm excited to invite you all to follow this journey, continuing to follow this journey, this long walk that we're on. My mother walked across the country in 1990, talking about nuclear disarmament, global peace, and global warming. Little did she think, after that march, she questioned what the heck was that about? What did we accomplish? What was the point of that? Was it worth it? Well, it was worth it to her daughter 24 years later, who was inspired by her story and by her bravery and by her commitment to change, positive change, that led me to delay college and do my own walk. And I'm still walking, and I implore all of you, please join us in this walk. The legal process is long. I first filed when I was 14 years old, a case in Oregon courts, but we're still showing up. And you can come and show up October 29th in your local courthouses, in your local district courts, in your capitals, in your schools, in your work offices. YouthVGov is the hashtag, so you can join us on social media. But please show up as your authentic selves, and I'm really excited to continue this walk with you.